Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall in our memories, grab a copy off the shelf, pop it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it. But probably more accurately, what time has done to us. My name's Justin, that guy's Mike.
Good evening, Justin.
And we're here to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane. So, wow, it's been a while since we've done this, Mike.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
Yeah, for those that are mildly interested, me and Mike had scheduled some traveling this summer. I went to New York to see some family and friends, and more importantly, to continue my never-ending pursuit of Godzilla. Mike, I did not find him.
Oh,
Again.
no. He wasn't at Madison Square Garden?
He was not, but this ain't over, G. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I didn't hear no bell, but I'm gonna just keep looking. And then I think, Mike, you, as I recall, you were exploring the subcontinent looking for the jade monkey or something like that, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was looking for Zigra or Rodan in the Galapagos Islands. Did not find any. This was the most disappointing part of my trip. I met a German tourist who I was really excited about. So, this is somebody I can talk to Bundesliga football about. She had no interest in it and she had been to one match before as a kid, and that's all she knew about it. And very disappointed. So that was my trip.
That's funny. I find that phenomenon a lot. I meet a lot of people, international people in my job, and I just assume that every Englishman is a Premier League fan.
Yeah.
And when they don't have any idea what I'm talking about, it's soul crushing.
It is. It'd be like somebody from Italy meeting us over there and say, "Wow, I love the LA Rams. Who's your favorite player on their team?" You're like, sorry, I don't watch NFL anymore. Or whatever
I don't like football.
Yeah,
because we're so inferior as Americans that we figure that's our way in, right? And what we don't have, it's like,
There was no questions about like, how do you feel about the Ukraine-Russia war, or what do you think about Bavarian culture? It was, hey, you watching football? I felt so stupid.
It's just we're so marginalized. But anyway, we'll get over it.
I'm okay now.
We may sound a little rough on this episode, guys, but that's why. So in order to keep the release schedule going, what they call in the business, we put some episodes in the can. So we had a flurry of activity.
What's the crust of the crown line? Is keep this train wreck moving.
Let's keep the train wreck moving. Yeah, so in order to maintain our release schedule, which to the clever ear, our good followers, you've noticed that we've increased our output to, instead of doing one show every other week, we're putting out an extra show, so basically a show every 10 days. That was brought about by me actually ponying up some cash and investing in a bigger server to hold some of our content.
Right.
And one of the benefits of, I wanted to keep some of our older shows online, so one of the benefits of doing that, to keep those shows online indefinitely, is you get a little more extra time to upload. Giving me my bohemian heritage, I will never not take an opportunity to waste money, so we're going to just increase our episodes. So, at zero cost to the audience, so you guys get like 33% more output, and you don't have to pay a dime. Nothing.
Me neither. Thank you, Justin.
That's right. You can't beat a deal like that in this economy, Mike.
You can't. No inflation.
The show actually has a budget, Mike, so we're moving up. So we're back in the chair, and from the last episode, you've noticed the pendulum's been kind of swinging from good movie to bad movie to good movie to bad movie. So luckily this week we're going to a bit of a relief, and pendulum's going to swing toward the good side again. Mike, we're going to review our first Oscar winner for this week.
Wait, quick retro question here. It's been so long. Did we not like Total Recall? I can't remember. Was that was that a bad movie? I remember something about cornflakes and Johnny Cabs, and then it seemed like a fever dream to me. It's tough to remember.
I don't think it's actually.
It was a bad one, right? It was a bad one.
It wasn't necessarily a binary decision, Mike. It was a kind of a love-hate.
Okay.
As are most of these movies. I don't have the courage to blatantly hate a movie.
Correct. Yeah, there's definite, at least with me, my philosophy of grayness. There's a gray area there. It's neither bad nor good. It's just on the scale, probably, if you had to go one way or the other, bad. And now we're seeing a good movie, like you say, an Oscar-winner movie. So you obviously can say this is a good one.
So in typical grumpy nostalgia fashion, when we review our first Oscar winner, it's not going to be the triumph of the human spirit or a period piece or an epic drama. It's going to contain elements of serial killers, cannibalism, and some homemade, very impractical gender reassignment techniques, Mike. Of course, we're talking about Silence of the Lambs, Mike, from 1991. Let's just jump right in, man. So this was directed by Jonathan Demme, who passed away, sadly, a couple of years ago. He's known for such feel-good movies as Philadelphia and Beloved. But he also, in his earlier career, was a video music director and did some great music-based films, including Stop Making Sense with Talking Heads, which is a fantastic kind of a set the standard for concert films. It was written by screenwriter Ted Talley. His niche is to adapt novels into screenplays. That's kind of his gig. And speaking of novels, it was adapted from the novel by Thomas Harris of the same name. So Thomas Harris is a very prolific crime author, and this is by far his famous work. It was released on Valentine's Day, 1991, Mike. So happy Valentine's Day! Great date night movie, wouldn't you say?
It is a good night to be a couple and watch this. Cuddle up.
Can you imagine this as your first date? The squirming you'd have to do if you didn't know anything about it. I thought was cool about this one. It was originally scheduled for a fall 1990 release, Mike, but Orion Pictures wanted to shelve it a little bit so they could over promote Dances with Wolves. So we've talked about that movie before. So yeah, well, one way or the other. Yeah,
Orion.
But the irony is that they wanted to kind of preserve some Oscar bait for that movie. But as we'll learn later, that this movie was much more successful on that front as well. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
Really,
I had a budget.
I don't want to. You said you were. I know we'll get to it, but this movie won more Oscars than Dances with Wolves, or was about the same. I know they were both Best Pictures, right?
I don't necessarily remember how many it won, but what it did do for like only the third time in Oscar history was it won all 5 of the big ones: Best Picture, Best Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay. Very rare.
We talked about this during the Goodfellas podcast because Goodfellas kind of got shunted by Dances with Wolves, and that was kind of annoying. The fact that
personal preference,
stupid Orion,
on those kind of things.
Orion Pictures is they went bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's good.
Good.
Spiteful. I love it. So let's get into this laugh riot. Mike, walk us through the cast.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We have only the two I should talk about really are Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins because they make this movie. So let's go into those two. Jodie Foster, Yale University grad, subject of Travis Bickle and John Hinckley's affection at one point. Fantastic actress. I think she was The Accused came out a couple years before this, right? Then she won an Oscar for that one.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I loved her in this movie.
Never bad. Never bad. Yeah.
Never bad. Anthony Hopkins, of course. This is the movie that made him. It's funny because you think of what he was in before this, and he was a fantastic actor. He was in Elephant Man and Bounty. And then the one movie I do remember him in this before was a movie called Magic because that Burgess Meredith.
Dude,
I love Burgess Meredith, but Magic is a creepy flick. You might hear me bring it up again later in this episode, but that's what this is the movie that I like. I said nobody. If you probably had a vague knowledge of him, but after this movie, like Anthony Hopkins is fantastic.
That's yeah.
And then he ends up being in every other movie like for the next 30 years after that.
Yep.
And then you have kind of round out the cast. You had Scott Glenn, who Alan Shepard. I mean, need I say more? The visual, but not from A Hunt for Red October, but the visual I have of Scott Glenn. I want you to close your eyes. Picture Scott Glenn, an urban cowboy, and him wearing his mesh shirt. I want you to put that visual in your head. He was a hunk.
If you don't mind, I'll just stick with him sitting in the Mercury capsule.
Okay, we'll go with that. After those kind of 3 main leads, you have a lot of, I'm going to say, quirky side characters. You had Frankie Faison, who plays a guard, who I remember from being his greatest role to me was Landlord in Coming to America, where he was just a few minutes on screen, just beautiful. Charles Napier, who plays a sheriff in this movie, I remember him audience might know him as a country singer in the Blues Brothers movie that gets kind of fake. He gets faked down and chases them and ends up in the river. That
great line he gives, you're going to look funny eating corn on the cob with no teeth.
I forgot about that. And then you had the kind of keep rounding out with our quirky characters. We have our serial killer, Buffalo, the guy who plays Buffalo Bill. I broke a rule. Using this cast, I try to do it, and I know I've said this a million times. Don't look up any of these people, but I had to look this guy up. It was bothering the shit out of me. I knew I recognized him from somewhere. And I was like, Ted Levine? Where did I know Ted Levine from? His most recent movie I saw him in, he was the idiot in Jurassic World. I think it was Fallen Kingdom. He's the guy. He's the hunter who tries to take the tooth out of the
the tooth fairy
Don,
guy,
whatever it was. Yes, and he gets his comeuppance in that one. And he's unrecognizable as Buffalo Bill in this movie. I'm like, well, that can't be the same guy, but he's appeared in quite a few movies. I was quite pleasantly surprised. Like I said, you had Chris Isaac as a lot of people listen to this won't even know who that hell that is, but in the late '80s, he had a couple of hits and was known for being on VH1 a lot. But he appears in this movie as a random SWAT team leader, and it harkened me back, Justin. I thought I wrote down Y next to his name, and then I wrote below it, "Hey, this is like Jimmy Buffett and Congo. Why were these guys? Why were these singers randomly showing up in these movies? It just was so bizarre." Yeah, and he did have a few lines in the movie, and he seemed capable enough, but it just was weird. But then. The piece de la resistance, the best cast member in this, and he's a callback for us because he was in Tim Burton's Batman. Justin, you know who I'm talking about, right?
I do, in fact, know. Yes, go ahead.
He's not Larry and he's not Daryl, but he was like I said, he was a henchman for the Joker that unfortunately died off. Tracy Walter.
He played Lamar. Lamar, I think
Lamar,
the doctor,
the mortician's assistant, and organ player, I guess. But I was like, there he is. He came back, and
love that guy.
And I thought this was the most clever name in the movie. But you look under the cast, and it was Dan Butler. He was in. People might know him from being on news radio as Bulldog, but his character's name was Rodan, or almost so close to Rodan, but he was the bug guy who identified the butterfly, the moth, the death's head moth.
Right.
And I thought, what a great name if they did that on purpose.
How cool are those bug guys, by the way? Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's the quirky characters in this movie that kind of made it. Even the I don't remember his name in here, but the guy who owned the self-storage unit, the old guy with his bodyguard driving this car. It was so it was just bizarre, Yeah, it's just funny to see when you have characters that are that kind of like I mentioned this, or Twin Peaks kind of characters. Like why is this guy so weird? But it adds to the haunting nature of the movie, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, like they pulled them off the cast of Fiddler on the Roof or something.
That's right.
All right. Well, so speaking of quirky characters, why don't you and I get started and kind of go through this? So let's go to the first watch. So Mike, the pretentious film snob that I happen to be, I always have these little flowery anecdotes about the first time I saw these movies, and I'm going to expose myself. I don't remember the first time I saw this movie. I know I probably saw it in the theater, but I just cannot bring it up in the old hard drive. But I do know that I was going through a breakup at the time, and I was probably with that person I broke up with, because you know how toxic it is when you don't do a clean breakup and you just kind of hang around that person for a while. It was probably during that post breakup thing. So I might have repressed a lot of that memory, but I don't recall the first time I saw this. I
thought you were going to tell me you took her to this movie as a date, and that's what broke you.
Well, that's a plausible scenario, but not in this case. But I remember, I don't remember it having a whole lot of impact with me at the time. So, but I think it's because I just don't remember anything about it myself. But hundreds of times I've watched this since then. But your pretentious little fanboy can't remember this time, so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
You're just like me. You're just like the I don't know which magazine it is, either Star or Us Weekly or Inside. It's one of those trash magazines, but they have a section that says stars. They're just like us. And Justin, I'm glad to hear you're just like me, because I have like several other podcasts. I have no idea where I saw this. I'm going to assume it was at a multiplex up here in Charlotte. My wife, who I remember, probably saw it with her. Neither one of us remembered seeing it. We did see it at a theater. Then I had this theory in my head. What if when a movie is so good, you forget your location, if that makes any sense? Like if you're so involved in a movie, Yeah, I mean, I know. You're so lost.
They're
And if it's a
supposed to do
theater
that.
you regularly go to,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're not. You probably shouldn't remember where you are if it's a regular kind of location you go to, and the movie itself kind of makes you forget where you are, and that's like the perfect combination of suspension of disbelief or suspension of just reality. And like I said, I'm so glad. I'm so glad because I have a blank space right here where it says first time seeing. It's just total blank.
All right. Well.
So good.
All right.
Good for
Well,
you.
we're old. Fair enough. So we can't do. Well, a good movie probably should take you out
But
and remove you from your horrible life, right? So
that's right. Our bad breakups, apparently.
So maybe it understood the assignment, and we're just well. Anyway, I think we should probably get started, Mike. So, Mike, hit the button. So our movie opens up with our main character, Clarice, running the obstacle course at Quantico in Virginia. Hey, Mike, Virginia's for lovers. Did you hear that?
Somewhere along the line, I think I've heard that.
I've been in Virginia. I would question that.
Oh no.
Yeah, so she's out running the obstacle course, and one of the FBI agents comes in, pulls her off, and says, "Hey, you've been requested to go meet with Jack Crawford, played by Scott Glenn." So he pulls her off, and as she's making her way to the office, you get to see one of several recurring themes of this movie is that the oppression of women, so to speak, and how it's the women in the workplace and how she's like in a man's dominated world. Like the first scene, you see her get into this elevator filled with men, all extremely larger than her, and she's sitting right in the middle, and it's kind of an awkward scene just to start. So she makes her way to his office, and he's asking her she's got a special assignment for her. He wants her to travel up to Baltimore into the sanitarium and interview a serial killer named Dr. Hannibal Lecter, who she immediately kind of whispers Hannibal the cannibal.
This was a really interesting filming technique with the actors staring right at the camera. Right, that's the first thing I noticed watching. It was like just from the very start. You have Jodie Foster and Scott Glenn just staring right at you as they're talking to their the other character. That's something I couldn't remember in my mind. Right, so it's kind of a Carnival of Souls kind of feeling, like just staring straight at a face. Right. It was interesting and really unsettling in a way.
He's the best co-host in the industry, guys. I was getting to that. So one of the film techniques that they used here is anytime that Clarice is being addressed on film, the character looks directly into the camera, so you're kind of looking at it from her perspective. So this is kind of like a character study. There's a claustrophobic view of this movie for her, and it's really to kind of symbolizes her path, I guess, so to speak. So, but yeah, it's a good observation there, Mike. So they're building this psychic profile while all the serial killers are trying to build a database, and he wants her to go to interview Lecter. So she takes it on. So there she drives her little was it a Pinto, Mike? I think I noticed that being a Pinto.
Oh, the beautiful Ford Pinto. Yes, it should be. It's unsafe at any speed. Part 2. It was a famous car that exploded if you hit it too hard in the back.
Right. So luckily, this car did not explode on the way to Baltimore, and she gets us. And she's met by the head doctor of this facility, a guy named Dr. Chilt. And again, you start to see the symbolism for that misogyny and stuff like that she has to deal with on a daily basis hits here as well. He immediately starts to hit on her. She's under there as an FBI agent, and he starts immediately condescending to her. He says, it's pretty clever of him to send a pretty woman to charm Dr. Lecter. It's like, hey, I went to UVA. It's not a charm school. And he goes, fine, whatever. He just dismisses her, right? So he has this really awkward conversation. So he walks her down to the bowels of the sanitarium. And this is where we starts to get really creepy. So there's this this rumpus room downstairs. Just it's really kind of a medieval looking kind of place, Mike. It's the walls are literally stone and there's bars and stuff like that. And she makes her way down the hallway. The camera slowly reveals the wonderful posture of Hannibal Lecter staring straight at her. And this is where we get our first conversation. It starts well. Lecter is relatively impressed by her to start, and then she makes the mistake of using a very poor pun. And we start to understand that Lecter's got this intricate personality where he's a serial killer, but he typically only kills people that are rude. And her social awkwardness really puts him off. And so as she gives him this, survey to read, he really kind of turns on her and it starts to do his serial killer thing, manipulating her psychologically and things like that, right? So he, what I like best about Lecter, and everybody knows, the story of Lecter. But what I think is interesting about the character is his pettiness, Mike. Like he can eat your face and kill you, but he can also just like cut you much deeper with these personal insults that he loves to do. Like
Although, yeah,
he makes fun of her shoes and her cheap perfume and her bag,
right, and perfume, yeah.
and in a weird way,
And her accent from being from West Virginia.
yeah, the accent. But those, I mean, those are the things that I think a lot of us may relate to. Those are the things that cut really deep, right? And you almost know that he knows that. So
Almost.
yeah, so the attempt to get this interview with him, it gets kind of botched, and he tells her to beat it. And then as she's trying to leave, she gets a rather unpleasant parting gift. We'll just leave it at that, Mike. Yeah, and the other inmate starts screaming and harassing her, and Lecter takes affront to that because those are bad manners. He's almost embarrassed by the rudeness, and he screams at her and tells her to come back. And as in a weird kind of peace offering, he offers, "Hey, I'll help you advance your career, but just if you'll please excuse the rudeness of this crowd," which I thought. Right away, we're talking about some sort of weird character, some very unique character never seen on a film before. So it ends up with he tells her to check out this address, this storage facility. She says, look inside yourself and check out for this character named Miss Moffat, and then she runs out screaming. As we learn later, he likes to be very cryptic and deal in anagrams and riddles and stuff like that.
He's like it occurred to me he's like Sherlock Holmes as a serial killer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the way Sherlock Holmes is, if you watch a lot of that stuff, it depends on, I guess, who plays him. But even Holmes is very dismissive with people who are under his intellectual ability, and very arrogant and almost smug and condescending, and has these weird quirks. And you see a lot of that with Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, he doesn't suffer the ignorant or the uneducated or the the rude people. So.
Rude and
he'll typically just eat them. So that's one way to deal with it, I guess. So after that, very unceremonious exit, she realizes that she kind of uses his riddle and it kind of decodes it, and she finds out there's a yourself storage facility in Baltimore, and she goes there in the middle of the night and looks at the storage facility that they're talking about, and she sees a head in basically a head in a jar. And that's the first clue to trying to understanding, who this serial killer might be. So it's implied that this serial killer started right there. And then we cut away to the Tom Petty song. We get we see.
I'll never listen to American Girl.
Well, there's a couple songs you never want to listen to again as a result of this soundtrack. But we see young Catherine Martin driving at night, doing what everybody does, singing along to the radio, and the Tom Petty song "American Girl," which is cool. As she pulls up to her apartment, she sees this rather gaunt-looking figure across the street trying to. With a broken hand, trying to load a couch into a van, and apparently this woman's got no filters. He asks for help, and she, tries to, accommodate him. I would deny him just based on the jacket he was wearing. Was it a Corvette racing jacket, Mike? I want to say it was a silver sateen Corvette. So, but she has,
and he thinks he's into fashion,
Yeah. So anyway, she gets into the van and helps him kind of load it in there, and then it was actually kind of a scary scene. Like, he says, "You're about a size 14, right?" And then he just, punches her, beats her to unconsciousness, and then, kind of cuts open the back of her shirt and kind of looks at her skin, and we get this awful kind of gasp that he gets, and we know things are bad at this point, Mike. And then he kind of pulls out his serial killer van, which is kind of a trope for every serial killer. They all have these vans. Yeah, so we kind of cut back to Quantico, and again, it's just another symbolic thing where Clarice is in the middle of this boxing ring, getting punched by all these men. And another agent comes down and grabs her out of here and says, "Hey, Crawford wants to go with you because there's been another murder up in this area, and it's a Buffalo Bill type situation, Mike." And next thing you know, she's on a chopper, and she's on the case with Crawford trying to investigate the Buffalo Bill phenomenon.
All right, pop quiz, Justin.
Yeah.
Did something about Clarice Starling's hairstyle in this movie seem familiar to you? Like maybe you see it a few years later in something.
I'm going to say Agent Scully from X-Files.
Yes, dead on. Especially the first season of X-Files. exact same hairstyle as Clarice Starling in this
I,
movie. It was
well,
crazy.
I cheated a little bit. I learned that Scully was
Okay.
the inspiration for Agent Scully on the X-Files was Clarice Starling. So
Well, never mind. I wonder where Chris Carter got it
Yeah.
from, but it hit me while I was watching. I
Yeah.
was like, look at that hair. No, not that I'm a big hairstyle guy, but
Yeah.
hey, it kind of worked.
So they end up.
And her accent. Can I talk about her accent a minute?
Please do. Yeah.
Please. Point of order. I know I've worked with a lot of people from West Virginia, and her performances in movies basically flawless. I don't want to get on it too much, but that's not a West Virginia accent. It could maybe be in Boone County, or there's another county down there I can't think of where Princeton is, but everybody I've ever talked to in West Virginia does not have that accent. And suspiciously, now that we have the ability to kind of move forward in time and watch other movies that she's done, like perhaps Nell, where she's supposed to be from North Carolina and she has the exact same accent. Just curious. And I thought that was interesting. That's a North Carolina. Am I being nitpicky? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll shut up now.
Mike, one of the first things I considered when looking for a co-host was someone that could be the accent police.
It's my one. It's like if I was a superhero, they'd be like my.
It's like you're
watching.
You're a savant.
Just watching a movie, and there it comes. I can't.
You're a savant, and I would be very disappointed if you didn't take notice of her accent in this movie. So
yeah, I mean, you listen to anybody from Wheeling or from Morgantown or from Fairmont.
Yeah.
If they sound like from Pennsylvania, you go a little further south, like I said, in Bluefield or Princeton. Maybe you get a little bit of a southern accent. There's so many hollows and valleys. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, it works. She's close enough to Kentucky or Virginia.
Yeah,
I can see it. Okay, I apologize.
All right, it's okay. It happens. It's all right. They go to the. There's a scene in West Virginia there where they found a body in the river and they're trying to bring it in. And they bring it to this funeral home, and again, more symbolism there. You got all these local police that are really kind of interfering and slowing down the investigation. And she kind of stands up in front of them and says, "Guy, y'all can go now. Y'all go now." And of course, they don't go on home now. They don't like that at all. Like they're all looking at it, and the camera actually does like a 360 pan of like all these these
they all look dour, and
judgmental faces. Looking, who are you to tell me to leave? But they end up leaving. And there's an interesting thing here too, where Crawford is meeting with the local police, and they tell him what happens, and he interrupts him and says, "Hey, sex crimes of this nature shouldn't be discussed in front of her," and that really sets her off. But she lets it go initially, and she calls him on it later. But she ends up running the autopsy. With our friend Bob from Batman, who's the doctor there, and as they're looking at the deceased, they notice on the back as they turn the body over, they see these patterns of skin that have been removed. That means something, and we'll get to that later. But they also find a bug cocoon or pupa, as Lecter notices later, pupa, and it's a death's head moth. Which we learn is kind of a calling card for the Buffalo Bill. Armed with this new round of information, she goes back to Baltimore to have a kind of private session with Lecter, and this is where we get our second major scene with them. And this is where they have the famous quid pro quo scene, where he agrees to help her with this investigation if she volunteers some personal information, because by this point he's taking a like to her and finds her interesting. They get enough information to he kind of leads her where to go in the case file, and then she ends up offering up some personal information about her history with her father getting killed and having to move to this essentially orphaned, and having to move to this ranch in Montana where the sheep are and the lambs are, Mike, and that'll be something later too. Yeah, get it? But they kind of set up this phony deal where if Lecter agrees to give the information he knows about Buffalo Bill, they'll put him they'll get him out of that horrible turnkey dungeon cell he's in and put him in a different federal facility. So, turns out that it's not really a real offer, Mike. It was a bluff. And then because the sniveling little Dr. Chilton can't handle the fact that he's not part of the case, and he wires and listens into the conversation, calls the senator, tries to arrange a deal, the real deal, and it kind of ends up where they agree to take Lecter to this facility in Nashville to talk directly to the senator to kind of convey this information. And as they're locking up, as they're prepping Lecter to go, this Dr. Chilton's kind of rubbing it in his face and being real tough, and He leaves his pen on the bed, Mike,
Oh yes.
and that plot point alarm goes off. Like
Plot point.
not good, right? So the next scene is that iconic scene where they wheel out Dr. Lecter on the dolly, and he's in his orange jumpsuit, and he's got the muzzle over his face, and everybody's seen that thing 100 times. And they meet with the senator, and he gives out again more cryptic information, but he's basically just there to insult and toy with everybody. And again, the pettiness, Mike. He gives out enough relevant information to get what he needs, but he also insults the senator's suit, which I thought was a great scene. Love this suit, he said. But he basically just insults and hurts everybody's feelings, and they swat him away. So they take him back to this, in the interest of transporting him. They take him to this ballroom in this Nashville hotel, which I thought was interesting, Mike. The cage that he's put in.
Oh yeah.
So
right.
So he's guarded by a couple, Nashville police, and so he's kept in this cage in a ballroom in this Memphis hotel. And at this point, Clarice comes back in to have their final meeting, Mike, where at this point is kind of he gets all the information he needs out of her about her childhood and her horrible story about trying to save the lambs, and she's kind of symbolically saying that she can save this woman that would silence the lambs for her, and that's where the title kind of comes from. But he's still kind of toying with her, but so. They catch wind that she's in there with him, and they come and grab her, and then she runs off to grab the case file from her, and you see their fingers touch. That's the only contact they have there. And it turns out that he's kind of marked up some notes for her in this case file, and they're kind of split up. So she's kind of sent to go back to Quantico, and then later that night, some interesting things happen in the ballroom there, Mike.
Nice.
He's of course
yes. The pen. Does the pen come back in?
It does, oddly enough, Mike. He palms the clip connector of the pen in his hand as he's getting handcuffed, as he's getting served dinner, and he can pick the lock. Of course, this is the thing I don't understand in movies, Mike. Why are handcuffs so easy to pick? Picking locks is very difficult, and there's very few people in the world that can actually do it. But in the movies, it's really simple. All you need is a paper clip, but he picks the lock, and this is one of the most horrifying scenes I think in movie history, is when he deals out his justice to these two policemen. He takes care of the first guy. He cuffs him to the pen, and then just takes out the baton and takes him out. And then poor Agent Pembry. He finds a blade and says, "I'll be right there." And this is where you get this great twist, one of the greatest twists in movie history. So the people come in the aftermath, they see the elevators moving, they say, "Oh, we got to get a SWAT team, something's going on." And they go out and they see, air quotes, Agent Pembry on the floor. And so they pick him up and get him put into an ambulance. And as they're driving to the hospital, Agent Pembry stands up, pure horror fashion, almost like Jason Voorhees style.
Yeah.
And rips off.
He sits up.
And he rips off his the face of. He had skinned the face off Agent Pembry, and we see that it's Lecter. And this is, people don't make much of that now, but that was the first time you ever saw something like that on film. And maybe it lost its luster over the years, but that scene in and of itself is completely horrifying.
Yeah, you're right. It's you don't. It's one of the things about this kind of looking back at these movies 30 years later. I don't know. I'm not going to say we're a nerd to it and used to it, but it's you don't realize, like you say, that when we were watching this in 91, oh my God, did we just see that? I mean,
exactly.
It's just so it's so haunting and just horrifying to see. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Before we move on, there's a couple things I do want to mention. You mentioned the dreamboat crooner Chris Isaac on the SWAT team. We also see another cameo, I guess, is George Costanza's boss.
Oh, he's really brief.
Mr. Kruger makes a brief appearance. I want to give a special shout out to Sergeant Tate and his mustache. One of the greatest mustaches in movie history. That guy's actually, I forget his name, of course, because we're live on the air, but he's actually a
Yeah.
I think an American folk singer, country singer. He's had
Really?
he's there.
Okay.
He has several albums that are great. He kind of looks like he does then now.
He does like a singer.
But he looks
Yeah,
cool.
that's funny.
Here's another inside baseball note just for me personally, selfish note. One of the paramedics, Buzz, the guy with the beard. For those that grew up in my area of the country, they might recognize him as newsman Buzz Kilman on the Jonathan Brandmeier morning show on the Loop 97.9 FM, kind of a Chicago radio staple. He's also a member of the All Bubba Blues Band, where he plays the harmonica. Just a local Chicago legend. I just want to throw that out. So Lecter's loose, and then everybody's concerned about Clarice's safety, and she says that I'm not really worried because she can't explain it, but she doesn't think he'll come after her because he would consider that rude. So they kind of resumed the hunt for Buffalo Bill at this point. And then, speaking of which, we kind of cut back to James Gumm's luxury house. Mike, he's got quite the rumpus room down in that basement. We see him sewing together the skin suit, Mike, which is really kind of horrible.
Oh yes,
it's got elements of Psycho in it, but again, people have really ripped off this concept since. But we see him in the sewing together, and he's got the little Bichon Frise dog, Mike. Precious, what I thought was precious. Yeah. So it's during this time they're trying to piece together the clues that Lecter left together in the case file, and then one of the things is he tells him that the significance of the moth, that he wants to transition. He thinks he's a transsexual. Because he hates himself so much, he incorrectly thinks he's He incorrectly thinks he's a transsexual because he hates himself so much, and he tells them to check, the three major hospitals for gender reassignment. And that's like the first path they have to finding it out. They figure out through that information that it's this guy named James Gumm, and they find out that he's got a house in Calumet City, Illinois, which there's another Blues Brothers reference right there, Mike. That's where they're from. But so that Crawford gets on a plane and goes to get him, but Clarice doesn't think that's entirely it, because she's a little more connected to Lecter, and through her own.
I got a question, and it's how I am. It's either I worry about accents or geography.
Yeah.
This could have either been a movie flub, or it could have shown how dumb Crawford and his team was. They said that at the address to go to, Calumet City, they received a shipment of from Suriname.
Yeah, the moths. Yeah.
But we found out earlier that Death Head's moths come from Asia. So Suriname is in South America. Was this okay? My question to you is: this a movie flaw, or is this showing you how dumb the FBI is, and they think Suriname was in Asia?
Good question. That's a great question, Mike. This is not what I hired you for.
just something I caught, right. And I was like, wait a second. No. I thought, well, maybe this is 4D chess here, and this movie's so smart that they're intentionally slipping that in there, saying, "Oh, they got the wrong house," because obviously when they get to the door, they're wrong.
I'll chalk it up the Ex Machina thing, and we'll just.
Okay. Don't you love my nitpick?
I do. I love it. So Starling, because she's a little more closely connected to Lecter, thinks there may be more to the story. So she starts to interview some of the people in the local town where Frederica Bimmel was. That's one of the murder victims. And because she's a woman, which is an interesting turn here, because she was a woman, she inspects this girl's room and finds some clues that men typically wouldn't find, the Polaroids. And as she's at the house, she realizes that she opens the door and sees a sewing room, and she sees a dress on the table that has the same patterns cut out that kind of mirror the patterns that were cut out of the corpse. And she realizes that she knows where this guy is. Right, she runs to she had a conversation earlier with one of Frederica's friends, and saying that she used to do alterations at this woman's house named Miss Lippman. So she goes to Miss Lippman's house, and she's met by our nemesis Jamie. Yeah, she interrupts his home video session where he's I'll never want to hear the song "Flying Horses" again, Mike. Yeah. But this is a pretty iconic scene where he's dressing up as the woman he wants to be, and he does his his wonderful little dance, and meanwhile, poor Catherine Martin's down in the bottom of this pit screaming, and it's a very unsettling scene, Mike, especially the old Tux scene. What I thought was great about this scene is that as unsettling and as upsetting as it is, the actor that did this, Ted Levine, he really fought hard because they were considering cutting the scene out of the movie, and it's an awkward scene. I'm sure as an actor it was very difficult to do, but he really felt that this scene kind of embodied everything about the character, and he's right, and he really fought.
Yeah, it worked.
He picked this thing off the floor and said, you've got to leave this in here. This is everything I've been trying to do. So a very brave, very brave act there by Mr. Levine for sure. If only he would have been so right about taking that role in Jurassic World.
No, it was dumb.
Yeah. But anyway, so it ends up with Clarice going to the house, and he opens the door, and she starts asking him some questions, and he's got some awkward social habits already, Mike, but he's really unnerved by this visit. And then as she's there, she looks over and sees all the sewing equipment in the house with him. And then what really sets it off is the moth lands on the spool of thread, and she knows she's found the right place. So he of course he runs immediately and runs down to the basement and kills all the lights, and you get this horrible scene where he's got the night vision goggles on and just toying with her, and he makes the mistake of like cocking his gun, and she hears it, and then she spins around quickly and shoots him in the chest and kills him. And then even that's not a relief, Mike, because even when even as he's there with the dead body, you still think something horrible is going to happen, right? It's just a very upsetting scene because Catherine's still in the hole screaming, and the dog's barking, and it's just very unnerving, right? But she ends up getting Catherine out, and we see the rest of the FBI meet her there and console her, and she basically single-handedly pulled this off without any men's help, right? Which was kind of the theme of the movie. So the last scene is her, graduating and getting her special agent status for the FBI, and she's pulled away to take a phone call, and it's Lecter. And it turns out that he tells her that I'm not going to go after you, and I would consider you to extend me the same courtesy. And as she hangs up, she's horrified that he's still out there, even though she knows he's not going to come. I think the fact that he's still alive and out there just scares her to death. So it's kind of an anticlimactic, kind of bittersweet ending for her because she did all that stuff, but he's still out there. And as we hang up, you see he's kind of disguised in the Bahamas, and we see Dr. Chilton has been kind of moved there for protective custody, and he's running to his current location, and he says that he enters that great line as I'm going to have an old friend for dinner, and in this case quite literally, yes. Mike. And then we get this amazing end credit scene, which they don't really do at all anymore. It's 5 minutes of this one shot, him just walking down the street. Yeah. And we get all the credits that are rolling after it, and even after 5 minutes you still see Lecter in the shot, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, he really taking his time, just casually walking.
Yeah, along. But the takeaway there is that you're happy that the girl is saved, but nobody feels really good at the end of this movie, and I think that's exactly the point. So that's it. That was the end, and the audience just loved this. It made so. Let's talk about the box office and the awards and all the accolades. So it was a tremendous hit. Kind of caught everybody off guard. Nobody really knew anything about this content. Like I said as before, it made $13 million in its opening weekend, which kind of covered its budget. And then it ended up making $130 million domestically and $272 million worldwide. And again, as we always note, that you have to take inflation into account here. So you can almost double. This is $1991, so double that, and you can kind of get a feel for how big this movie was. As we talked about before, it swept the Oscars in all the big categories, all 5 majors. It's the only third time it had ever been done, and it really kind of set a standard for a lot of tropes, essentially. But what it did do is it kind of set a tone that prior to this, serial killers were all boogeymen and monsters, and what it introduced was the sympathetic, complex villains of the serial killers. And looked at that. So it really set the stage for all future movies about FBI profiling that had never been done before. And it really was kind of a feminist hero story, which hadn't been out there for, it was really a strong, empowering role for women. So strong, in fact, that the FBI uses this movie as a recruiting tool to recruit more female agents. Mike, it's that.
Oh wow! You mean they don't go to the their go to is in the ABC show that came out recently called Quantico? That's not their go to.
Boo!
What a
stinker. Yeah. So it really kind of set a standard. So and other things, it also was added to the AFI list. It's in the National Film Registry in the Library of Congress, so that's pretty good. Interesting other things here. It's a lot of lists show that Lecter is the number one villain in movie history. I think Darth Vader might have some words about that, but it did result in a couple. It does have a legacy and some other content too. It had in a prequel called Red Dragon, directed by Hollywood hack Brent Ratner, but not too bad, starring Ed Norton as the agent that brought in Hannibal Lecter in the first place, but it kind of focused on another. Ray Fiennes plays the serial killer in that one. It's really great. It's actually a pretty good story. There was a sequel to Silence of the Lambs called Hannibal that director Ridley Scott took the lead on, and even the lovely and talented Julianne Moore didn't really save this movie too much. I think just the lack of Jodie Foster in there. She did not want to agree to make sequel because of the content. It was just too much psychologically to make the first movies. So she opted out, and like I said, Julianne Moore took over as a continuation of that story, and it's just not as strong. There was a tertiary sequel called Hannibal Rising, which is kind of an origin story for Hannibal Lecter, where they picked an actor that looked so much unlike Anthony Hopkins. You really didn't have the opportunity to even get into that one. It had a couple TV offshoots. The movie Hannibal with the TV show Hannibal with Mads Mikkelsen, which was actually pretty good. I'll watch anything he's in. He's a great actor. And then the real stinkburger Clarice on CBS, not too recently, focused on Starling. I watched that show, and it confirms my suspicion that network TV is just crap. They had all this wonderful story and content that they could have used, but they made it into a serialized procedural thing where Clarice was on the case. It had a story arc, but it was mostly about Clarice, solving crimes in 44 minutes, which is just every week everything was just wrapped up neatly. And I
was
and I love how network television shows, like, because they can't use real profanity, they throw in dams and hells and son of a bitch as much as they possibly can. They shoehorn every TV acceptable profanity, and it's just tiresome. But boo to that.
No, I was going to say I remember right after watching Manhunter, which was kind of a prequel to this movie, but it was a bomb at the box office. But I think it was directed by Michael Mann, and it had William Peterson as kind of like the male version of Clarice Starling. They had a Hannibal Lecter character in there, but it was a very similar story to this one, where he was trying to find William Peterson's trying to find a serial killer, and he needs Hannibal Lecter's help, and I think they go to him, and and he's very. I forget the actor's name who played him in English.
Brian Cox from Succession.
Yeah, that's right, Brian Cox. Yeah, and it was really cool, but I like I said, it flopped, and I don't think anyone even knew about that movie when this Silence of the Lambs came out. It's like it was just totally forgotten. But then after it came out, I was like, oh yeah, you ought to watch this movie called Manhunter. It has Hannibal Lecter as as a different guy, but very similar.
Yeah, the movie Red Dragon is a remake of Manhunter. So Thomas Harris had written a trilogy of novels. The first one was Red Dragon, then Hannibal, and then Red Dragon. Yeah, then Silence of the Lambs, then Hannibal. So,
Then Hannibal.
So another offshoot for this that I think deserves some mention is that it produced a very campy off-Broadway musical called Silence the Musical, which I have seen at the Trustis Community Theater in Columbia, South Carolina, but it's all over the country. It is hilarious. It is horrible, and it is funny, and it features some songs called Mike. You'll appreciate these songs. Papa Starling. They focus on really heavy on her accent. Put the effing lotion in the basket is another catchy tune. And then
yes.
Are You About a Size 14 is also another number.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
So this was the fourth highest grossing film in 1991. And Mike, just so you're curious, I know the MTV Movie Awards Inception was the next year. So this was the last movie. So this movie was not recognized by the geniuses at
Oh, too
MTV. They
bad.
just missed it. So
Yeah, I don't. They probably. I would imagine they probably would have skipped it
yeah,
anyway if it came out a year or two
yeah,
later.
most desirable male, Anthony Hopkins. So
Yeah, it's good
yeah,
posture.
so let's just let's go through our grumpy meter here real quick. So the first time I saw this, like I said, because of my memory, I'm going to have to go with the default 3 out of 5. I'm sure I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was great, but I was just a younger kid and didn't really know much at that time. But my final review this time, I think it's a 5 out of 5. I think it's an iconic role. It's it's an iconic movie. It sets so many trends. It sets so many standards for other movies today, with the Mindhunter and every other show that came out about every other show about FBI profiling. They're all direct derivatives of this movie, and I think that a movie that sets a standard like that it stands alone. So I'm going to go 5 out of 5 on my grumpy for that one. Mike, what about you?
Same here. Like I said, it was one of those. I don't remember where I saw it, but I just remember loving it when I saw it, and it was just so unique. And when I say loving it, it was one of those. It's kind of like the movie Affliction or The Shining. I loved watching it, but then after that, I'm like, wow, that was disturbing. I don't think I could handle that
Right.
again. So I hadn't seen it again until last night. To be honest with you, I even scenes from it, if I came across it like on HBO, TBS, or wherever they were trying to show it, never even stopped to watch it. It was not one of those kind of movies where like, oh, I got to watch the rest of this. So when you suggested it, I was kind of okay, but it kind of, as we talked about earlier, it doesn't have the same impact when I'm watching it now, as far as just kind of that visceral feel of like, wow, this is hard to watch.
Yeah.
But also, as you said, you can't get away from what the movie tropes that were created from this.
Yeah.
And everything about it is just so good, so well done. What makes it is the interaction between Lecter and Starling, and just those few meetings they have. I don't think if that wasn't in the movie, it would be just a regular procedural kind of movie for me. But their interaction, I mean, how good the acting is in this movie, the storyline, and just everything about it. The plot is so tight, and just there's no fluff.
I'm with you.
It's not one scene in this movie you say, what the hell is
exactly
that for? There's everything was good, flowing in the same direction, and I loved it. Again, 5 stars out of 5 again for me. I was going to talk to you too about how this kind of female heroine, you wouldn't see that in a movie today. A female heroine in a movie today has to be like a man.
Yeah.
It has to be tough. It has to be a little wafy girl that can beat up 300-pound men, or have to constantly smart mouth her superiors by showing her how smug she is, or not you can't be wounded, you can't be sensitive, and even though like the issue of misogyny is not preached to you in this movie, it's subtle in a way. You see it, it's what a movie is supposed to do. You can see it on the screen, you can see it in these guys' faces looking at her. They don't like her. They don't think she should be in their world. You don't need to preach about that, but that's what a movie today would do. And it's a movie that treats its audience like they're somewhat intelligent.
Yeah, that's it. It was made by grown-ups for grown-ups, and it works, right? So yeah.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're getting near the end here. Let's talk just real quickly about other things we may be doing right now, what we're watching and currently enjoying. I'll go first real quick. I'm gonna break format a little bit. I'm gonna tell you not what I'm watching, but what I'm listening to, Mike. I've been listening to a band called Spoon. They've been out for years. I think they started in 1993, but they're an Austin band, a rock band. Britt Daniels, the head guy, and they're just a great American rock band. For those that don't know, check out they've got a discography that's just amazing. If you like rock music, that's like real rock music. But I would suggest the album "Ga Ga 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 Ga" from 2007, or even "Hot Thoughts" from 2017. They're just a great band. Another band I've been listening to on the retro side, Mike. Nobody really knows about these guys, but they're one of my personal favorites. They're a band called Two Skinny Jays, and they're sadly no longer around, but they were from the early 2000s, late 90s, and they're a hip hop band, but they kind of originated the subgenre called nerdcore, which is I relate to, and it's they're a hip hop band, but they use pop culture and science and nerd references a lot, and just a great feel good party band. And here's an example of some of their lyrics, Mike. Sorry, Buster, I know my flow sounds used, scripted and directed by the likes of John Hughes, recycled recitals of enemies and idols, all scrawled in the hall like Anthony Michael. So, so I think that's genius. Sorry, Kanye, but that's how you do that. It's much more better than yeah, But yeah, it's Two Skinny J's. Check them out, Mike. What are you into right now?
That sounds like the last Beyonce song I heard that get released.
Yeah,
Bam. Yeah. I've been on the road for the last couple of weeks, so I've been catching up on Bundesliga football. Sorry, I'm not as educated. Leipzig is off to a really bad start. So is Bayer Leverkusen.
So is Dortmund.
Of course, Bayern Munich. Oh, Dortmund. They lost in the last minute of the last game, and they're looking a little weak right now. They're doing fine, but my favorite team's Mainz is in Hoffenheim. They're surprising a few people right now, so we'll see if they keep it up. And and I'm going to recommend our audience to watch Manhunter.
There you go.
So I'm just going to throw that out.
It's not bad
because it is a underrated movie, and like it was Michael Mann. Every movie he's done, I've liked. He's done a lot of crime movies, and it has, from what I remember, the flavor of that movie compared to Silence of the Lambs is much more palatable to a mainstream audience.
Think Silence of the Lambs meets Miami Vice.
Yeah, it's kind of like a palate cleanser because you're not going to watch a movie as good as Silence of the Lambs, but it's a little more stylized, and you'll enjoy.
All right. It. So, guys, just remember, you can always check out any show information on Grumpy Nostalgia on our Instagram page. You can send us an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you. So, Mike, that's going to wrap it up. Anything you want to say before we go?
Well, no, I got to really go. I got to take Precious out for her walkies.
You put that lotion in the basket, Mike. All right, guys. So, for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.